Thanks very much for joining, and very exciting to have this chat with all of you. I think what I would like us to try and do today is, rather than discussing very high level where are we in our journey and so on, is being more specific with areas, with companies, with sectors in which we think exits are closer. What are the main issues you're seeing on both exits and M&A, and so on and so forth. If we can just do a quick round of introductions, it will be great. So if we can start with you briefly.
Okay. All right. I think it's working. Hi, everyone. My name is Aya. I am Moroccan by origin. I work currently at Briga, which is a European fund that now we're trying to see Africa actually moving forward. I previously worked in VC, and mix between VC and private equity. I was also an ex-entrepreneur before joining VC, and I'm excited to have this panel with you.
Hello, everyone. I'm Naha. I'm a manager and fintech portfolio lead at Endeavor Egypt. For those of you who don't know what Endeavor is, it's a global organization that basically supports high-impact entrepreneurs, helping them scale and grow and kind of reach that, 10x growth trajectory. And we also have an Endeavor Catalyst Fund, which we invest in our 42 markets that we operate in. We currently have our fund 4 is around $500 million, and we've had over 280 investments over the 37 markets that 37 out of the 42 markets that we operate in. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. Mohammed Ali Aidin, I'm a principal at Global Ventures. Mia, a Series A and Series B investor.
Hi, everyone. I'm Natalie Colby. I'm the managing partner of Morscom 22, which is a venture capital fund focused on Africa, raising $200 million for Series A, B, and C.
Okay, great. So thanks for that. And starting with a very simple and easy question. In which sector do you think we should start seeing the first material exits? And by material, let's refer to $50 or $100 million in actual threshold. And what type of exits do you think these will be? And if you can touch on why, will be interesting. I don't know, Aya, if you want to kick us off.
Yes, sure. So in Africa, I'm actually still bullish on few sectors. The first one is obviously fintech. I know that most of the exits already have been in fintech, recorded, around last year and even early these years, early these months of 2023. I think that the fintech market is still untapped. A lot of startups starting to really get into multiple verticals, peer-to-peer payments, remittances, lending, etc. So there are multiple verticals that startups have started to tackle. But I really still believe that it's still untapped. A lot of countries are still facing the same issue. And I do see some good pipeline, actually, for the seed stage that I hope at some point they would reach that level. If we're speaking $100 million plus, I'm quite bullish on that. Regarding what type of exit would I say, I choose to roll out the IPO, for Africa for reasons that we might discuss a bit later. But I do believe, in the M&A, in the M&A sector, specifically from corporates. As you mentioned, corporates here in Africa, specifically the foreign ones, might not acquire for getting the market, but more for the technology that the startup would actually build. So I'm bullish into these technology companies are building, some high tech for the African ecosystem in fintech. Another sector that we might discuss later is insurtech. I believe that the insurance penetration is really low in Africa. It might be cultural, is something else to be discussed, but I do think that a company that would crack that business model of insurance would definitely get, some high momentum and some good exits going forward. Needless to say, some climate tech, because we just have a good pipeline of good, of funds for Series B, etc., and DFIs looking at climate tech. So private equity might really be interested because it has good governmental support. But these are the three sectors that I believe would be at the top, with others, of course, coming after.
Thanks. Anyone else want to jump in on that?
Yeah, sure. So actually, like adding to what Aya just said, I think fintech definitely as a sector is very interesting. However, I personally don't believe that it would be the up-and-coming sector for potential exits. And the reason for this is when we look about the set of regulations that we have in place that would enable some sort of product innovation to have this kind of holistic platforms that potentially could offer products from multiple streams, we've scored pretty good advancement in terms of fintech on that front, but not enough yet to create these kind of holistic platforms that could be of a sizable exit potential or opportunities in the market over the coming period. Yeah, when we look at the e-commerce sector, I think, and what we have seen over the past particularly 3 years, have been a very interesting growth and potential both together in terms of how they address the market. We've jumped into the second wave of e-commerce. It's not anymore about like just going and placing an order as a consumer, but we've done B2B e-commerce, and we started kind of expanding on the value chain of what is needed to be within the e-commerce platform, including fulfillment and other kind of models. So from a readiness perspective, I think e-commerce kind of positioned to be more ready than fintech, although that fintech has kind of more hype, much more traction, a lot of money flowing into those companies over the past period. When it comes to the kind of exit opportunities, I think we are 2 or 3 steps away, and you've mentioned that on your presentation from IPOs. I don't think even, maybe it's realistic to kind of look at the potential view of where we can land when it comes to IPO, but on the short term, it's not going to be an IPO for sure. It's going to be 2 waves. The first wave is going to be more on the consolidation side. We're seeing a lot of consolidation money, capital flowing in from the GCC. Also a lot of consolidation money circulating within the African ecosystem. I don't think it's going to be on the north of 50 million. It's probably going to be less. And then the second wave would be more coming from the M&A side. I believe that there is a huge role for private equities to be able to kind of play this role, yet we don't have the sizable funds in the region that would be able to do such sizable exits, and corporates looking for digitization and digital innovation and not missing on their market share and their current product offering would be kind of the core driver of exits over the coming period.
Okay, thanks for that. Now maybe to you with the next question, which is what can we do? You know, we've been with Actis for a couple of years before. That has been very active also in the later stages. Some forms of buyouts, or at least investors buyout and so on. What can we do actively as an ecosystem, more so as investors, to prepare our companies for exit?
Yeah, I think it's a conversation we need to be having with the startups from day one. I mean, I don't think it's something that they need to obsess about, because obviously there's a business to run, but I think being very deliberate about and understanding who your potential buyer is going to be, and making sure that you don't crater your cap table in a way that can cause an issue for a potential buyer. And it's this point that I think is an interesting one around the role that strategics play in your cap table. And we've had a couple of conversations with startups where they've got a strategic, and it's often a very kind of helpful thing to have, because they do provide strategic advice and inputs, etc. And it often gives the entrepreneur kind of a boost of confidence to have a big and strategic that comes and invests in their business. But when you're looking to exit, they might end up being the only exit option for you, and obviously that then impacts on the valuation. So it's an interesting, I don't think there's any right or wrong answer in that, but that's something that we actually spend quite a lot of time with companies, is being very careful about how you put your cap table together, particularly when it's a strategic, because it can help and it can also hinder your exit options.
Okay, thanks. And now maybe moving to you with Endeavor's experience in working with founders, in fundraising, but also, I guess, a global network of which many exited successfully. What can we be doing? What are you doing? And as an organization, and in your experience, is useful on that front?
Sure. So as an organization, we kind of want to take a step back and look at it from what support services we need to offer the entrepreneurs in order to help them scale, grow, and then eventually kind of exit. So there are kind of 3 main things we look at. First is obviously access to capital, and this is where the investors come in. I mean, with Egypt back in 2022, we had around 160 deals with a total funding of bit north of $520 million. Nigeria being first with around 830, and Kenya being second with around $630 million. So definitely there's a lot of interest. There's a lot of investors, foreign investors that are looking into Africa as a region to invest. And as investors, we need to help these startup companies, kind of help them grow using, again, like building on what Natalie said about, being strategic with their cap table and kind of building on that and helping them create milestones to reach that, end goal. So that's for access to capital. Obviously, our global network, having 42 markets, we also help with access to market. So we are able to help them expand into the different markets that are strategic as well to scale and multiply their impact. And definitely access to talent. So definitely we have a lot of experts, corporate leaders that basically help these companies through lessons learned, successful stories, failures that they can learn from and continuously kind of grow and scale as well.
Thanks. I've shared some of my views on what are the missing ingredients in the ecosystem, but very interested from, there's a lot of experience on stage. So from your experience, what should, other than, saying give us more time, which is always a nice ask, what else should we be actively doing, pushing as an ecosystem? Where are the gaps in your view to see a more active exit ecosystem in the next 2-3 years rather than the next decade?
Yeah, I think there was a gap. I think, and you said this in your opening presentation, in later stage local capital, and that's certainly an area that we're playing. And you often, there's not many funds that can support businesses in B and C rounds. I think there's quite a lot of activity, but when we get into B and C rounds, the local funds, there aren't that many. I think there is a gap there, and as you mentioned, the hot kind of money from outside has gone away for now. I think it will come back. And I think what we as an ecosystem need to do is really to be public and shouting out from the rooftops about what is happening on the African continent, because we are so small when it comes to, less than 1% of VC capital comes to this continent. So we do need to kind of get out there and put ourselves on a global stage so that when the capital does come back, and it will in a few years' time, that it does actually come back to Africa so that it can support the larger exits when they do happen in the kind of C and D rounds.
And any other, which I fully agree with, the later stage funders, but alongside that, anyone sees any other gap that is potentially addressable?
If I may just say something. So I've noticed also in Africa that we are quite open. Even the global capital that comes to us comes from 2 particular regions, either Europe, either the US. And we have been focused sometimes also as entrepreneurs or as VCs. Sorry, we've been focused on these 2 regions, even in our roadshows, even in going into the global stages. I think there's a lot of capital to be unlocked also around other regions such as Asia, the Middle East. Also, they started coming. Latin America also. I've seen few fund of funds also that are looking into Africa. So I do believe that we just need, as an ecosystem, it's a 5 years work. Like, I'm sure when we go on stage, they're not going to come directly, but it's a 5 years work for the next generation to come. And I do believe that we have to unlock impact capital, which is already there. It's already, they're already investing in us, but also the commercial capital, and kind of showcase as Africa can show some returns. It's a work to be done, obviously, but it's good to start doing the work from now.
Okay, thanks for this. When you're looking at your portfolio companies or the companies you work with and have worked with, any lessons or advice or insights on M&A in Africa?
So there's a lot of lessons, I would say, and over the past period we've seen, and probably it's the only thing that is still ongoing at the moment, which is the consolidation capital that I spoke about earlier. There is a lot of flow out of GCC into the region here, particularly in Egypt, and we've seen a lot of offers and term sheets being offered over the past period. And I think on the personal side, there was exactly what you referred to during your presentation, that there is some sort of the $1 billion company dream. And sometimes this would kind of swipe out any form of potential for this term sheet placed on the table to materialize into something meaningful. Because at some points, it might be much more stronger, much more meaningful to be part of a bigger gear or just consolidate and have a bigger gear to kind of deliver the impact that you're dreaming of as a founder. And with market conditions changing, it became clear for us that there was some sort of cloud affecting the vision of the founders in terms of where they should head with the company and with the business over the coming period, particularly with very basic challenges that they know about beforehand. So I think getting affected by the idea of mega success there is no mega success, there's success. There's no classifications of success, I would say. There's only success, but there's always kind of sub-classifications that founders will get to see about where they want to head with the companies overall, and that led to a lot of missed opportunities.
Thanks. I don't know if anyone wants to comment. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I mean, I think the advice that we give on consolidation is going to happen. I think that's a given. So put your ego aside and don't wait too long, because there are some good companies there. You want to be consolidating with them. Others might do that if you're sitting back and not wanting to put your ego to one side, because obviously there can only be one CEO, right? And I think that's what stops a lot of these consolidations happening is maybe ego is a wrong word. I mean, you've built this business, it's your baby, and now you're going to have to give it up or share it with somebody. It's hard. It's a very hard mental step to take. But if you don't take it or you wait too long, the opportunity might have gone. So I think that's probably a big thing that we talk to our companies about. Just put your ego down and don't wait too long.
Just to add to that, I mean, what we've noticed as well is that when companies kind of earlier on have that plan of this exit strategy in maybe 5 years, whether it be M&A or IPO, their mindset throughout that process is more open. And that's where kind of the egos are a bit less versus ones that are thrown into getting kind of deals and going like, okay, maybe this is a good opportunity. And then this is maybe where it rises like, oh, this is my baby, or, I need kind of these terms instead of these terms, and not looking at the founders versus kind of what's best for the business. So that's kind of how we...
Thank you. Leading, in my view, to an interesting point, because a lot of these die at the valuation discussion, so when there is a disagreement on valuation, and this could be either from the founder's side or from the funder's side at times. So what is interesting to me, and I've learned that different funds do it very differently, how do you think of valuation at entry in detail rather than, high level, we need to 10x? How do you go about valuing a company in such a market that is, what drives your valuation decisions? I don't know if Aya, you can start and.
That's actually one of the toughest questions because we're going through that right now. So as a fund that is trying to tackle Africa, so in Europe we do anywhere between pre-seed and Series C. But in Africa, we're starting to build a pyramid from scratch just because we believe there's an ecosystem to build. So we're only doing pre-seed and seed. And let me tell you something, it's one of the hardest things that I have to go through right now because I can see that the valuations are going. I think the expectations of the founders have changed overall in terms of multiples. So we came with, with a mindset and with like a set scorecard and also with the, with a set valuation methodology that sometimes, often actually, we have to adjust the premiums that we have to put. I can say that around Africa, we split the regions a little bit. Like we don't treat the startups in Egypt just like the startups in Nigeria or the startups in Kenya, etc. Starting with Egypt because where we are, I believe that Egypt is kind of like in this tricky position. It's between the Middle East and Africa. It has macroeconomics of Africa, but sometimes often raises in multiples of the Middle East. So it puts it in this position also with the access to, with the GCC capital that is coming in. A lot of times the valuations that we have, even for pre-seed or seed, are a bit above what we're thinking. But to be honest, how we value, just to come back to your question. So first of all, we look at each region apart, we look at the economics of the region apart. We look at the potential of the company and we believe in the founder. So us as Briga, we're kind of an operator kind of type VC. So the founder for us is the one that we start with. If we are absolutely happy with how things are, we just embark upon the discussion. We have a certain multiple for every certain sector, and we know those multiples, and then we adjust the premiums depending on how the startup is and how is it working out. We're leaders, we like to lead around, so of course we check the ecosystem. We're not going to just drop a deal like that. But let me just say that it's one of the most objective things that we do, and we just like to have an open discussion with the founder, making sure he's not getting diluted, also making sure our fund economics are not going to be hammered.
Thanks.
Yeah, I mean, the way that we look at it is an exit-led view, always. So having a look at, the valuations and multiples and everything going in is interesting. It's obviously we do triangulate that. But once you look at where the business is going and you apply a multiple to that, who's going to be the buyer that's going to be buying that at the end? And you might say, oh, well, that's pick a number, 7x revenue multiple. It makes sense. It's all good and well. But when you apply it to their forecast, it ends up being a $2 billion business. You can say, well, who is going to come onto the continent and put $2 billion into this business? And I think that's often where we have to kind of recalibrate. So we always look at the exit, who's the potential buyer, what can they pay, and then we discount that back to say, well, then does this valuation make sense? It's mainly the way that we do it as one of the kind of triangulation methods.
Thanks.
I'd like to add just a quick thing. Definitely, this is one of the things that we consider as well in terms of calibrating the valuation. And I think deciding on the valuation early on, 10x is just this easy high-level number, but how to get there is really important for us. And that's kind of the calculations that we make sure that we do before entering and deciding on whether this is kind of an inflated valuation or up to bar. So I think valuations are function of market. So how big is your market is a very important aspect, but it's more importantly, how much you can capture and what does it take you to get there. So if I'm coming in $20 million at $100 million post-money valuation, to achieve my 10x, I need to be at a $1 billion. If your market share to get to the $1 billion valuation is going to be 20 or 30% of the market, this is unrealistic. This is not going to happen. So then for me, this is an extremely inflated valuation without even diving into further details. So 100%, I think we also put comparables to market share opportunity across different market players and what does it take them to get there to be able to kind of calibrate for the right entry valuation.
Thank you very much. Just been, trying to move us to the Q&A part in a couple of minutes, but any lessons maybe from IPOs that you were involved with in other markets about how can we help African founders think through IPOs, which markets, what should they be start doing, even if an IPO is 3, 4, 5 years away, if everything works, now to make it more realistic?
Yeah, so we've done a few IPOs on the continent, mainly in South Africa and Egypt. And actually, a lot of the investors in the Egyptian IPOs are South African fund managers. So there's quite a lot of pension fund money that comes out of the South African market. Unfortunately, the South Africans don't pay a lot. So if you're looking to IPO in South Africa, the asset managers there really do drag the valuations down. And the only way that we would ever contemplate listing there was if we knew we would get lots of international interest in that, because then they'd pull the South African asset managers up. And then you need a relatively big business, with a kind of $200 to $300 million float, to be able to attract the international investors. So I still think that Africa IPOs, unless it's in those two markets, South Africa and Egypt, with international interest, you're probably then looking to somewhere else, whether it's London or one of the European exchanges.
Any other comments around that before my last question?
Perhaps it's safe to mention, because I've spent some time in Saudi Arabia actually last year, and one of the things that I focused on is I had a few discussions with Tadawul, for example, that it's a pretty liquid market. It's the most liquid market around the Middle East. And I was quite stunned by how organized the market is. It's quite structured. That they have a parallel market, and also they have the main market. It's quite liquid. And I was happy to know that Saudi even is looking to onboard few companies from the world to actually list there. So it might be a potential market soon, depending on how the capital markets there. Of course, they are now in testing phases, but I've heard, that few people are trying to get some companies that they're like in that stage. So I think if that market is open, perhaps there's also the Abu Dhabi, stock exchange that I don't think it's going to open up soon, but there is a potential for there. Other than that, we did have one IPO that I would say, from Egypt that went, to the US, but sometimes it doesn't go very well for multiple reasons. So I do think that the best way really for even founders to think about exit is really just build it for another corporate to get acquired.
Thanks. My last question before we open it up is from each of you, maybe one piece of advice for founders that are early now, say in their seed or A, to how to incorporate an exit thinking into their, if they should, into their journeys.
Okay, so we can go from here. So if I may start, I would start building the relationship early. Just check in all the companies that got successfully acquired, because there were a lot of M&As, just to put the difference. There were a lot of M&As that are equity swaps. I'm speaking here about successfully acquired with a good amount of cash. What I saw is that they were really building the relationship really early with the potential company that would acquire them. It's a 3-year, 4-year relationship. They knew they understood the corporates, they understood what they needed, and they kind of built their business model and their target towards that. So I would say, just build a relationship early with these corporates and know what really they want, understand them.
Definitely, I agree with that. Also, scanning the different markets that you would want, to have that exit strategy. Building on what Aya said about Saudi. I mean, Tadawul is growing 20% annually. It's reaching $3 trillion. So definitely, it's kind of the MENA market, IPO go-to market for exit. And a lot of the companies in Egypt, specifically the startups, they're looking at Saudi as kind of the exit market to kind of exit for in the future. So definitely kind of scanning again the different markets and seeing what would work.
Mohammed, any advice from you?
I would say focus on the 3 letters OJO. Which is operational, governance, and organizational structure from day one. That is, it acts as some sort of a block ahead of following some sort of a successful exit at one point, and creates a lot of issue. And usually, it's the kind of training aspect for potential buyers, particularly on the governance side. So let's make sure that from day one we have the proper governance in place, and make sure that you are building something to exit. And please put your ego aside, as you just said. I'm just going to steal this from you. So put your ego aside, please.
Yeah, I would say governance. I know it's a really boring topic and everybody goes, oh, really? Can you say something more exciting than that? But everything about looking at different markets, etc., will give you the difference between a 5x and a 10x. But governance will take you down to 0. And that, I think, as an ecosystem, we can all be doing a lot better than that. When things like that issue that happened, it's obviously, I'm picking on it, but the one that came out with Flutterwave, and there've been a bunch that happened after that, immediately the international capital just goes, ugh, Africa, why would we want to go and take that risk there? So we have to outperform on governance in Africa, because investors will not invest. It doesn't matter how beautiful the business is, what the market opportunity is, how fantastic the founder is, if they've got a little itch when it comes to governance. So unfortunately, we have to go beyond the global best practice when it comes to governance, and then to be able to wipe out any noise around that, for the future of the ecosystem, to be frank.
Thank you very much for all of you for the panel, and kindly join me in thanking the panelists. So thank you. And I think we have a few minutes for Q&A. So.